In 2001, South Africans believed that some chaps are sitting somewhere conspiring against us to weaken the rand.
South Africa's Competition Commission is locked in a high-stakes legal
Given the anger that this has generated in the country, people are saying things like, you know, this is why people are losing their homes because of high interest rates. These are the effects of this kind of action.
That several local banks colluded with international institutions to manipulate the rand-dollar exchange rate.
In a single day, South Africa lost billions. Not to war, not to a natural disaster, but to something far more invisible. A currency doesn't just fall, it gets pushed.
When you think of the framing that they used when they were doing this manipulation, the chat room and the Bloomberg business service that they used to arrange these trades, the chat room was called ZAR Domination, Z-A-R, Rand Domination.
Wow.
And the evidence was piling up. Yeah, no, this is such shocking material of, you know, these, let's say, hyperactive young professionals, I must say, using race and class analysis. They're white boys, right? And so you really find, nearly all of them, you really find these banks needing to...
December 2015. Within days, the rand collapses. Markets panic. Billions disappear. But here's the real question. Who made money while everyone else lost it?
How did the rand move
Rand
from 18
manipulation wasn't enough for Standard Bank.
used by the West?
My theory is that the West manufactured a
banks are manipulating
devaluation
the
of the
rand, and
rand
we're
in
aware of it.
1994, so they can buy our minerals from much cheaper. A similar thing would apply to electricity, where they could not allow a black government to provide cheap electricity that would help power black enterprise.
To understand how a currency can be attacked, you first have to understand what it really is. The rand isn't just money, it's belief.
Welcome back. Let's talk some finance. The rand has been struggling to recover.
In late
after
trading
South
yesterday, the
Africa
rand
was
strengthened to
grey-listed last week.
11.85 to the US dollar. This after a precious increase of 11.92, which sent a lot of positive reaction in the markets. Some analysts have attributed the strengthening of the currency to comments made by SA officials attending the World Economic Forum in Davos, where they spoke about ending corruption and, of course, improving the health of public finances.
Belief that a country is stable, that its economy works, that its future is predictable.
The one thing, obviously, that's changed over the past few weeks has been people positioning for the elections. So heading into the elections, we saw a lot of concern about what a worst case outcome could look like. So would that be an ANC, EFF or MK coalition? And of course, investors have to take a little bit of risk off of the table in that scenario.
At the center of that belief is the Reserve Bank. Its job is to protect the currency and maintain stability. But every day, the rand is traded globally, bought, sold, speculated on. And that means its value can change very quickly. Not always because of reality, but because of perception.
Clients are very comfortable when things are lovely, and then a politician says something stupid and we shoot out to 20.
What it comes down to is the fact that if you don't have trust in the South African economy, you can't invest in the South African economy as freely, and that's going to cause a rand depreciation.
Is the rest of the world sending South Africa a serious message? Get your house in order economically. You can't have a situation where the rest of the world is losing confidence in South Africa.
The underperforming economy could also see the ruling African National Congress lose some support to opposition parties, especially in the urban areas, during the local government elections in a few months.
The ANC actually seems to be blaming the private sector for manipulating the currency, for manipulating the economy to undermine President Jacob Zuma's administration. That lack of trust between the governing party and the private sector makes it very difficult for one to imagine any workable solution to alleviate this immediate problem.
In modern finance, money isn't just a tool, it's a weapon. Because if you understand how markets work, you don't just react, you can influence. What do you do when you don't like the president of a country? What do you do when you don't like the government of a country? How do you influence the market?
News manipulation.
on the news, Cal.
This is one of the most common types of market manipulation, and it's happening almost every single day right in front of your eyes.
We have actually seen the rand now erase its gains for the day. It is a little weaker against the dollar, but this latest outcome seems to be leaving traders a little bit confused as to what can happen next, because no time frame has been set for Zuma to step down.
And so with us is Kit Jukes of SocGen. Talk about volatility, Kit. Take a look at this. It's the overnight vol for $1 rand, and you can see the huge spike. We haven't seen that kind of spike since early May. What happens to the rand if the vote goes through and he's ousted?
The rand rallies. I think that's clear in the market's mind. The market thinks he's unlikely to be ousted, and so you get a bigger reaction if he is than if he isn't. We'll see the rally in the rand gain further momentum were it to happen. I think that seems clear enough.
You can imagine when there's political turbulence, our markets get affected somehow, and the local currency was no exception. It was trading up to 8% against the US dollar at 11.87 at one point at the close of the JC this afternoon.
But buying up all these dying news outlets and using them to send out catalysts for their own investments. And you know what they do with them? Spread FOMO. This almost acts as a snowball effect. Think about it. The huge media outlet creates the FOMO story. Then, all these retail investors jump on the bandwagon, creating almost a snowball effect.
Here, the fundamentals are much more challenging, and so you would need good news on the policy front to change that mediocre narrative. And that's how investors, global investors, are looking at recent policy developments. And frankly, right now, they're not seeing good news. They're looking for good news, but they're not going to assume there's good news coming until it's really there. And unfortunately, until that happens, the sentiment towards South Africa is going to remain a little bit lukewarm.
Calls for the president to step down are growing louder, but it seems he is not going anywhere just yet. And it looks like the markets have discounted this in already.
The question is, in a post-Zuma world in South Africa, where will the rand go? We think that the rand will go somewhere more where it's fundamentally valued around 11.50 over a long term in a post-Zuma environment, assuming that constitutionalists in the ruling party and in the government take hold and do the right reforms, structural reforms in the economy. We should be in a much more constructive place than we are today.
But this is not the only type of manipulation. Oh no, there are much more slimy and dark techniques that firms use. One of them is what we're going to call the pump and dump.
Imagine for a moment that a friend of yours collects rare coins, and you have the view that those coins are going to go down in value. So the way you would short those coins is you call up your friend and say, "Can I borrow a few of your coins?" And he says, "Sure," and you borrow the coins. You then sell them for the $1,000 each that they sell for in the market at the time, and then you wait for them to drop in value. And you turned out to be right, and the coins dropped in value to $500. You go back into the market, you buy them back for $500. You've sold them for $1,000. You've repurchased them for $500. You've made $500 on each coin, and then you return the coins to your friend. Your friend is in the same place he was when he started, and he has the same coins that he started with. You might have to actually.
A lot of times when I was short at my hedge fund, and I was positioned short, meaning I needed it down, I would create a level of activity beforehand that could drive the futures. It doesn't take much money. Similarly, if I were long and I would want to make things a little bit rosy, I would go in and take a bunch of stocks and make sure that they're higher, and maybe commit $5 million in capital to do it, and I could affect it. What you're seeing now is it probably is bigger market now. Maybe you need $10 million in capital to knock this stuff down, but it's a fun game and it's a lucrative game, and you can move it up and then fade it. That's often creates a very negative feel. So let's say you take a longer term view intraday, and you say, listen, I'm going to boost the futures, and then when the real sellers come in, real market comes in, they're going to knock it down. That's going to create a negative view. That's a strategy very worth doing when you're valued on a day-to-day basis. And I would encourage anyone who's in the hedge fund game to do it because it's legal, right? And it is a very quick way to make money and very satisfying.
This is the chief commonly used tactic. A bet that the rand will fall. You sell the rand now, buy it back later at a lower price. And the difference is profit. Now imagine doing that with billions. But big players don't rely on bets alone. They rely on something far more powerful: fear. Because when investors are afraid, they don't think. They sell. And once selling begins, it spreads. One investor sells, then another, then thousands more, until the fall feeds itself.
The rand plummeted against major international currencies yesterday evening, and this happened shortly after our President Jacob Zuma announced the removal of Nene. By around about 20 minutes past 9 last night, the rand was trading at 16 rand 34 against the euro. That is down 2.74%, and it was 22 rand 50 against the pound. That's down 2.5%. The rand down 1.3% against the greenback at 14 rand and 83 cents. That's more this morning. It did break through 15 rand at one stage.
December 2015.
Fellow South Africans, I would like to announce changes to the finance portfolio in Cabinet. I've decided to remove Mr. Nhlanhla Nene as Minister of Finance ahead of his deployment to another strategic position. Mr. Nene has done well since his appointment as Minister of Finance during a difficult economic climate. Mr. Nene enjoys a lot of respect in the sector, locally and abroad, having also served as a Deputy Minister of Finance previously. I've decided to appoint a Member of Parliament, Mr. David van Rooyen, as the new Minister of Finance. Mr. van Rooyen serves as a whip of the Standing Committee on Finance and as whip of the Economic Transformation Cluster. He is a former executive mayor of Narafong municipality and a former Northwest Provincial Chairperson of the South African Local Government Association. I wish Mr. van Rooyen all the best in this new deployment. The new deployment of Mr. Nene will be announced in due course. I thank you.
To the public, it's politics.
The president has come here to tell South Africans that the rand was already in decline, which is not true. The fact of the matter is...
Honorable Maimane, Honorable Maimane,
the president
if you have an argument to make, this is not the way to do it, Honorable Maimane. Please take a seat, Honorable Maimane.
Order, Speaker.
To markets,
take a seat,
it's a signal.
Honorable Maimane.
Order, Speaker.
And within hours, the reaction begins.
And the decision was strange because Nene has not been in the position for long and has actually generated quite a lot of confidence in himself and the ministry while he's there. He obviously brings a lot of institutional memory. He was Deputy Minister of Finance before that, and of course he took over Pravin Gordhan's shoes and now being pushed out for an unknown. And when I say unknown, you know, from a point of view of the financial markets perspective, the new minister is not known. So I really do wish him well because he's got a lot of work to actually gain, for the markets to gain confidence in him quite quickly because it needs to be settled down. The rand's dynamic is interesting because with the downgrade by S&P to a negative outlook, now you've got the prospect of a credit rating downgrade. This comes at a critical stage of our economy. That downgrade takes us into junk status. So immediately you've got a dynamic in the financial markets where the normal natural inflows now are more hesitant because, you know, what if there's a downgrade? And of course there's the possibility of some funds preempting a possible downgrade by starting to lighten their load in South Africa. And we sit with a current account deficit that is quite big that needs to be funded.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the government's deficit itself needs to be funded. And when the rand weakens, the bond yields rise, which, of course, raises the government financing, and you can get into a negative spiral. At the same time, the US are about to raise interest rates themselves, and that is generating what we call a risk-off event globally. So you've got a number of headwinds for the rand that the rand is struggling against. And we've seen this happen before, where suddenly what's been trading in a steady thing suddenly, falls apart, and then the rand accelerates almost into free fall. And we saw that in 1998, 2001, 2008 as well, where just suddenly the rand goes from a particular level, several rand weak, and we don't want to see that, especially if it's starting off at the 15 rand level.
For years, this looked like normal market behavior until investigators found something.
I read that in 2017, 2 gentlemen would have been arrested. Jason Katz and Christopher Cummings were jailed after pleading guilty to participating in this activity of price fixing in the foreign currency. In the court documents, it says here, Christopher Cummings was a dealer of Central and Eastern European, Middle Eastern and African currencies on the FX desk of a New York-based financial institution from approximately 2007 to 2013. Cummings, an FX dealer to competing institution, conspired to suppress and eliminate competition by fixing prices. What did these 2 gentlemen actually do? Firstly, who are they? What do they do? How do they make their money? And what did they actually do here?
These are gentlemen who work for banks, and they sit in the foreign exchange rooms. Normally, the foreign exchange rooms have got 2, the interbank one and another local desk which deals with currencies that pertain to you and me. The interbank one is for banks themselves. So these people in front of them have got screens, Reuters screens sometimes, and Bloomberg screens, where they monitor the movements of the currency in particular times. And not just that, they also have money in their vaults, which they can use. Either that money would be the bank's money, proprietary money, or individual of their clients' money. So it depends which one they have, or they could as well have both. So they begin by communicating with the other parties in various banks to say, all right, let's see if we can manipulate this currency up to this particular level and make this type of profit. So this is exactly what they did. So this issue started around 2007, indeed, quite correctly, and up to 2013. And then the government in the US picked it up. Remember, there are 2 currencies that were involved here, the rand and the dollar.
Former President Thabo Mbeki set up the Rand Commission to investigate the manipulation of the rand when the local currency weakened from 7 rand 60 to 13 rand 48 cents against the US dollar. Then CEO of the South African Chamber of Business, Kevin Whitford, blew the whistle, accusing 3 big corporates and a global bank of being behind the manipulation of the rand. He predicted that the rand would pass the 20 rand mark against the dollar and possibly throw the ANC-led 7-year-old democracy into political and economic turmoil. The commission managed to arrest the collapse of the rand, but it was shut down prematurely with no action taken against any company while Whitford was fired. Seething with anger, the SACP says this is tantamount to unseating a democratic government.
I blew the whistle in December, January, let's call it January 2002, and President Mbeki established a commission of inquiry into the rapid depreciation of the rand. But that's a very different scenario to what we have now. In those days, it was what I would consider economic treason because our currency wealth was migrating out of the country on an irregular basis, with the subsequent demise of our currency in a very, very short space of time. In 2001, it dropped, from I think it was 850 to 1359 in a very, very short space of time. And of course, it impacted on commodity prices, it impacted on balance sheets, it affected everyone. In this case, as I read it, it is price fixing.
Messages, private chat rooms used by traders, suggesting something more than coincidence, coordination.
Now, first off, to educate the audience, I'd like to know what currency manipulation means, how it works, and what implication it has on financial transactions.
Well, Akan, the currency manipulation refers to manipulating the price of the currency, which is referred to typically as the exchange rate. So any currency is expressed in terms of some foreign currency, let's say in this case the rand in terms of the US dollar. So if you want to purchase dollars, you have to provide rands in exchange, and the other way around, if you want to purchase rands from elsewhere, you have to provide dollars. Now, in that market, where that two forces come together for demand and supply of rands and dollars, that's called the forex market. Now, it's a very, very large market, one of the largest markets in the world. A lot of money gets traded, and a big part of it is not really for purposes of buying or selling stuff in dollars or rands. It's just manipulation, speculation, and investment purposes. So what happened here is that there are, of course, many thousands of transactions going on. They are run typically by different banks, and the allegation is that the different banks shared information with each other so that the person doing the buying and the person doing the selling have the same information about the other party, which means that the average prices, depending on what they are doing, the average price will be different from what it would be under normal competitive conditions when you don't know what your other competitors and buyers and sellers are doing. So that's what manipulation means in this context. It's that the price of the currency, which is the exchange rate, that exchange rate is different, and depending on the perspective you take, it can be higher or lower than it would have been if there was no manipulation.
All right, but
the implication of that, as you asked last part, the implication of that is, of course, has a huge effect, because the exchange rate determines the price at which imports come into the country, and of course the price that we get when we export stuff. So it has a huge implication for many South African businesses if the exchange rate changes, or because of manipulation. The size of the manipulation must still be determined. We don't know the details of that yet, but it is certainly, there is a potential impact on businesses and consumers.
They didn't follow the market. They became the market. They controlled the rand. Its value was in their hands. But proving manipulation is incredibly difficult, because in finance, talking isn't illegal, trading isn't illegal, even making the same move isn't illegal, unless you can prove it was planned.
South Africa's Competition Commission is locked in a high-stakes legal battle with 28 local and international banks accused of colluding to manipulate the US dollar-rand exchange rate between 2007 and 2013. The case, now heading to the Constitutional Court, alleges that traders from these banks coordinated bids, offers, and spreads via chat rooms to distort currency markets for profit.
We begin here. Standard Bank says it has not manipulated the value of the rand, nor engaged in any anti-competitive or criminal conduct. In a statement, the bank says such claims are false. The bank further says comments made on social media platform incorrectly link various unrelated and unfounded allegations with the Competition Commission inquiry currently under adjudication before the Competition Appeal Court. On Friday, National Treasury said the alleged currency collusion with which the Competition Commission has charged 28 banks did not influence the rand exchange rate and is not the cause of the rand's decline over the past decade. UK-based banking group Standard Chartered Bank recently admitted guilt in the investigation, which has been ongoing since 2017, and paid a penalty. SCB and 27 other banks, local and multinationals, have been implicated in the probe. Local bank Standard Bank says it defends itself against what they call false allegations. Standard Bank says it is committed to behaving with the complete integrity at all times, and its long-run performance depends on the success of the economy and on the economic well-being of their clients.
And if you say they don't have jurisdiction, then it means absolutely no one will then prosecute these banks for manipulating the rand, which then means that the rand can be manipulated by anyone without anyone intervening and prosecuting for that. That's why it's so important. But most importantly, it's so important for us because it talks to the jurisdiction, the power of the authority to prosecute international cartels. If this stands that we don't have jurisdiction, anyone can collude on anything that affects the South African economy, and nobody will be able.
Is felt everywhere. Fuel prices rise, food becomes expensive, life gets harder for millions who have no idea this is even happening.
The Competition Commission indicated that some of the banks implicated in the manipulation of the rand have generated about R1 trillion a day between 2007 and 2017. On Friday, on the other hand, National Treasury says the alleged currency collusion with which the Competition Commission has charged these banks did not influence the rand exchange rate and is not the cause of the rand's decline over the past decade.
Because in the end, the rand doesn't crash. It moves. It moves with fear. It moves with confidence. And sometimes it moves when powerful people decide it should. And when it does, the people who caused it are rarely the ones who pay for it.